there was an artificer subclass that didn't make it into a book. It was the archivist, which I adored. I loved it. I think you loved it as well. It was.
I not only loved it, I wrote it.
You wrote it.
Yes.
You brought it into this world and you wrote it. This has seen significant changes. It is no longer an artificer. It is now a wizard, the scribe. Correct?
Yes. So when we released the archivist originally for the artificer, satisfaction for it was okay, but there was a fair amount of static in the feedback we got about just what is this subclass. Like even people who liked it were often wondering, like, why is this an artificer? It's really bizarre. And what a number of them pointed out is this feels more like a wizard because it's all about, words and scrolls. Mm-hmm. Help. That was sort of the tone that we got. Like it's basically we kept reading feedback on the archivist of like, I really like this, but I can't make heads or tails of it. And that's why I say help. Like basically they were looking to us of like, can you please take these cool parts and frame them in a different way? And so that's exactly what we did with the Order of Scribes, because I think the feedback was right that it really was a wizard subclass, and that became clearer and clearer as we revised it, especially given the fact that scrolls throughout the history of D&D have been associated with the wizard class. Of course, a number of classes can use scrolls, but as the supreme academics among the character classes of D&D, writing stuff down has typically been associated with wizards. I mean, they are the only class where, their main class feature, their spellcasting, is in a literal book. That no one else has to lug a book around and study it to change what spells they can cast. So the word, text, books, scrolls, that is the domain of the wizard. And so we took the archivist, took the pieces of it that people liked best, and reframed all of it through this lens of wizards who focus on being scribes and not only making scrolls, but also making an uber spellbook. In the original archivist, the archivist could awaken a consciousness within an object of almost any sort. People thought that was cool, but it was a bit abstract of just being able to walk around and basically like, this rock now has consciousness. And as we were working on the Order of Scribes, we thought, what if we kept this idea of the awakened object, but it's your spell book that awakens? This book that is everything to a wizard, this book that a wizard carries everywhere, that has all of the most important words to a wizard within it. Wizards care about many words, but a typical wizard cares most about the words inside their spell book. And so what if that object that is the wizard's constant companion is the object that awakens? And so our answer to that question was, let's do it. And that's how we ended up with the Awakened Spellbook, where your spellbook almost becomes like a familiar for you. And you can even then eventually cause your spellbook's mind to manifest. And, you can now imagine this wizard having a conversation with their spellbook, which I love the image of that because I love batty scholars in stories. So I find it very charming, this notion of there's Thaddeus over there again having a long conversation with his book. and there's Martha over there talking to hers.
I imagine I would have a very sassy book. I imagine the book gets quite judgmental by the time you hit 20th level, and has very hard opinions
Yes.
about how you've lived your adventuring life and the spells that you
Yeah.
choose.
Yeah.
It's got like a lot of role play flavor. Like it's pretty ripe for some interesting character moments. That's what excites me the most. And it kind of it doesn't give you immortality, but it makes you a tougher wizard at higher levels. I mean, it's almost like a Horcrux or the Ring from Lord of the Rings in some sense. So that also has retained itself.
Yes. So we thought, what if your spellbook not only basically became your buddy, but what if your very life essence became attached to it? Inspired a bit by the fact that wizards are the ones who can become liches, but we thought, what if right in one of our subclasses for the wizard there was a lich-like option that was not sinister, because lichdom relies on you walking the deathly path of undeath, which that is always a dangerous bargain when it comes to a person's sort of the state of their soul and the D&D multiverse. And so we thought, what if instead the spell book itself could power your life, and so what we came up with is, if you die and you are willing to essentially sacrifice spells in your book, you can come back and you start using the spells themselves as life force. Now, the trade-off is if you do this, you lose the ability to cast those spells. And the only way to get that ability back is through the wish spell. And wish, that spell, has the potential to become uncastable for a wizard if they use it too many times to do anything other than replicate a spell. And that's a very intentional, that interaction with this design, because really we wanted it to be that, like, this sacrifice is meaningful. You have the chance of getting maybe a few of these spells back, but the wish spell itself even will eventually conk out on you. And so a wizard needs to be very, very careful and hope they have maybe a cleric friend who can actually bring them back, so they don't have to burn their spells this time. But they have that option.
Yeah, it's very fun, and it's kind of the same treatment you gave the genie. The genie has this extra layer that is so entrenched in D&D lore, and that's why I already was on board for the archivist. Regardless, I didn't mind it was an artificer at all, because I have a little glowy friend that I can talk to. How could I not want that? But now I know I love a lot of subclasses, but this is my favorite wizard. This is the most wizardy wizard, and I adore it. Is from whatever type of story you like, whether it's like gothic horror or Disney. Like, this is like the wizard. So I'm very excited to give this one a spin.
That also was one of our goals for this subclass, was to create essentially Wizard McWizardson, and we were inspired to go that direction also by work we did a few years ago on the Lore Mastery Wizard. That was a subclass that ultimately got abandoned. And even though we abandoned it because the satisfaction scores just were not high enough, the thing that was very clear in the feedback on the Lore Mastery Wizard is people loved the flavor. So we brought some of the flavor of that to the Order of Scribes. And there is even actually a little feature in the Order of Scribes that is a nod to the Lore Mastery Wizard, and that is the Order of Scribes' ability to change the damage type of your spells, basically by having your book swap the damage types of certain spells in your spell book. And if we end up publishing this, we're going to end up putting some limitations on that. But I love just the general theme of it.
Yeah.
No limitations. It will still be cool and versatile. But almost always, when we go through the playtest process, the final version of something will end up having a few more limitations in place than the playtest version had.
I can understand that. I like the idea of this particular wizard interacting with the Rune Knight. The Rune Knight being like just not as good at it. You've only got, I know these letters. and a very judgmental scribe wizard looking at the Rune Knight and just like, you never studied.